You first. When you take a look at both of these QBs, who had the most impressive start so far in the preseason?
Well, to me, it was Shedeur. I didn't see any interceptions when he was out there. Didn't see anything like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think Dillon Gabriel did a bad job. I was impressed with the brother, but I'm going to go with Shedeur. You know, the pressure was on him. The spotlight was on him.
Stephen A. Smith didn't just call out Dillon Gabriel. He held him accountable and made him rethink his comments. The moment Dillon Gabriel spoke and went after Shedeur Sanders, it wasn't a minor slip. He crossed the line and stepped directly into Stephen A. Smith's wheelhouse. And Smith answered with a clear, direct response that left no room for misinterpretation.
The comparisons were emanating from the media more so than anybody else. And that's what I think, that's exactly who I think he was directing his comments towards. Having said that, Dillon Gabriel, respectfully, it was stupid. A very dumb comment to make. First of all, let me tell you something right now. In every walk of life, far beyond the parameters of a football field.
This wasn't casual sports commentary, it was a decisive critique. Dillon Gabriel's comments were taken apart by Stephen A. Smith with clear, direct points. Gabriel, a quarterback with solid stats but limited top-level achievements, chose to take a public shot at Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur, who has handled sustained media scrutiny and on-field expectations, became the target of an unnecessary criticism. Smith responded by challenging Gabriel's standing to make that claim, and by defending Sanders on the facts. The outcome was clear. Gabriel overreached, and Sanders didn't deserve the hit.
Dan Orlovsky would sit up here in comparison to Shedeur Sanders, who did no such thing, and say, hey, thought he looked better. I got to give him the edge here. I thought it wasn't bad. A pick six and a fumble, and we can get over fumbles. Have you heard anybody say that? I know it's possible. Have you ever heard anybody say, we get over?
Stephen A. Smith responded immediately. As soon as Dillon Gabriel made his comments about Shedeur Sanders, Smith delivered a clear, point-by-point critique that drew national attention across the NCAA media cycle. Dillon Gabriel has a reputation as a good quarterback, not a dominant one. He can post strong numbers against opponents like Tulsa, but his performance has been inconsistent when the stakes and competition rise to playoff level.
Well, those who produce get treated differently than those who don't. What he said echoes the mentality of all of America practically, and most certainly the world, as we see things being globalized more and more every day. It was a stupid, idiotic, immature comment, because clearly you were feeling the heat because a lot of people was talking about how Shedeur should be QB.
Dillon Gabriel is a capable quarterback, but not a standout. Even so, he chose to talk down to Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback who has navigated constant scrutiny and pressure and still represents the future of a program that was struggling before he arrived. The comparison was weak. The criticism was unnecessary. Stephen A. Smith recognized that and dismantled Gabriel's argument with a clear, direct response.
How the Browns react to this, how the locker room reacts to this, how Shedeur reacts to this, because it was a clear shot at Shedeur. But let's say Dillon Gabriel's talking about the media. How could you be a brand new quarterback in the NFL and the first time you get behind a mic after your first game, you throw the media under the bus? That's arrogance.
Stephen A. Smith excels in moments like this. When Dillon Gabriel made his remarks about Shedeur Sanders, Smith responded with a focused, direct critique. He questioned Gabriel's standing to make that claim, noting that Gabriel has transferred between programs and has not been a Heisman finalist. Without theatrics, Smith laid out why Gabriel's resume doesn't justify taking public shots at Sanders. Smith's point was clear. Targeting Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback central to his program's future and consistently under intense scrutiny, was misplaced. Gabriel's criticism lacked the substance to support it, and Smith methodically showed why.
Content today on his 42nd I want you to be meaner. Birthday. That's number one. Number two, after the game, the Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski said there was a mix-up in the routes and that players were in the area that they shouldn't have been.
Look at Stephen A's face. Look at Stephen A's face. Look at
Stephen A.
Oh my Lord.
The strength of Stephen A. Smith's response was that he didn't just address Gabriel's remarks. He challenged the image around him. Dillon Gabriel often presents himself as an overlooked contender ready to surprise. But the reality is that his profile hasn't commanded broad attention. It's a clear reminder that not every opinion carries equal weight. In defending Shedeur Sanders, Stephen A. was direct and precise. Shedeur isn't just a quarterback. He is Deion Sanders' son, which subjects him to scrutiny far beyond anything Gabriel has faced. Even under that pressure, Shedeur has maintained his composure, shown confidence, and delivered in key moments that helped revive a program many had written off.
Stupidity, all of it. I thought it was a clear shot at Shedeur due to the fact that his Oregon coach threw a shot at Coach Prime and Shedeur during their meeting at Colorado last year. But you know what? The cream rises to the top. Let's see what happens this week. I see a lot of the media talking about they think it was about the media and not about Shedeur. And I think that's a chess move.
For Dillon Gabriel to take shots at Shedeur Sanders was a miscalculation. Stephen A. Smith made the mismatch clear. Gabriel's attempt to shame Sanders was unnecessary and counterproductive. You don't target Deion Sanders' son when Deion has turned Colorado into primetime television. It underscored that Dillon Gabriel has often played with a chip on his shoulder because the spotlight hasn't followed him. He has been around long enough to compile numbers but not to earn broad respect. That's why going after Shedeur was misguided. Sanders, despite ups and downs, drives headlines. Gabriel's most notable headlines have been his transfers. Stephen A. Smith pressed that point without hesitation, challenging Gabriel's standing and leaving his argument looking like a forced throw that turns into a pick six.
You know what? Still needs to thank me a little bit more for that restaurant I treated him and his family to, because it was big time, and stop embarrassing me by going places and trying to use coupons. That's how pathetic he is. The point is that a pick six and a fumble is usually considered a bad day.
Stephen A. Smith didn't need to raise his voice to make the point. He presented Dillon Gabriel as a player whose talk outpaces his resume and defended Shedeur Sanders with clear comparisons. That's why he called Gabriel out so directly. The comparison wasn't just unfair, it was forced. Now look at Gabriel's record. The numbers are solid and he can win against average defenses, but the resume lacks defining markers. There's no sustained Heisman contention, no late season surge that reshaped the national picture, and no postseason moment that cements a legacy. The track record reflects steady production, not top-tier impact. That's the gap Smith underscored. Gabriel's criticism of Shedeur Sanders wasn't supported by what he has accomplished, while Sanders continues to carry a program under constant scrutiny.
Let's see some of them step up and make some plays out there.
Ain't no way.
Gabriel
Ain't no way. He's not built like that. No way.
And this one is picked off and going back the other way.
Oh my God, why did he stop playing?
Now it's a foot race. And that is that.
They told me bust out my AP, perfect timing. H-shot, we about to get legendary. Shedeur start the next game, baby. Shout out Dillon though, you know what I'm saying? Bro, I love you, my heart. What am I bigger than cheese, bro? You know what I'm saying? But Shedeur got it.
Shedeur Sanders is a national brand who draws viewers for both performance and result. Dillon Gabriel's attempt to diminish him read as resentment. And Stephen A. Smith called out the insecurity and lack of awareness directly. Colorado under Deion Sanders is prime time, and Shedeur sits at the center of that spotlight. If Gabriel expected the sports world to agree while he took a shot at Shedeur, he misread the moment. Smith dismantled the argument and questioned the credibility behind it. Gabriel will move on. He'll keep playing, give interviews, and have fans, but this exchange will trail his media profile as a reminder of a misstep. It's a clear example of a resume that doesn't justify taking public aim at a quarterback carrying that level of scrutiny and responsibility.
For the Cleveland Browns preseason game today is that the way that some white folks watched Shedeur Sanders last week is the way that some black folks were watching Dillon Gabriel today. And it's not Dillon Gabriel for Dillon Gabriel's sake. Most folks don't have a problem with Dillon Gabriel. It's what he represents, which is the disrespect of a black person for no other apparent reason than they are a confident black person.
Dillon Gabriel thought he was aiming up. Instead, he was placed back among quarterbacks who are good but not great. Stephen A. Smith made the central point. Dillon Gabriel doesn't shape the conversation. Sports are about narrative as much as numbers, and Gabriel's story doesn't move the culture, while Shedeur Sanders does. Smith highlighted that contrast clearly. By the end, Gabriel's credibility had taken a measurable hit. The critique was decisive and sent a broader message to any player considering public shots at Shedeur Sanders. If you step into that debate, you will be held to a higher standard and your resume will be tested. Dillon Gabriel learned that the hard way.
How you you feeling?
I'm getting there. You see what I got on, right?
That's why I was asking how you help for it.
Yeah, I'm getting there. See?
Prime, what did they have to do?
I had blood clots.
Okay.
And they amputated, you know. But I work with it.
Man.
Yeah, I'm amputated. So I get that work done a couple times a day. Keep the blood circulating, blood flowing, but it's a new normal. And the best thing about here, we have a whole medical team on the second floor. Right. We have a whole medical floor, which is great.
Deion Sanders is shaken, this time not by a hit on the field. In a sudden turn, Ryan Clark has uncovered a serious plot affecting Shedeur Sanders' NFL draft status, and the disclosure is reverberating across the sports community. What once looked like a simple scheduling delay may actually be a calculated effort to undermine Deion's son. The facts suggest intentional sabotage, a breach of trust, and repercussions that could be far-reaching. This is no routine football headline. It is personal, and Coach Prime did not see it coming. The sports world loves to celebrate underdogs, yet it often takes even greater pleasure in tearing down rising stars. Deion Sanders is witnessing that cycle now, not from the sidelines as Coach Prime, but as a father. The lights in Boulder remain bright, the cameras keep rolling, and Sanders still wears his gold watches, sunglasses, and natural swagger. Still, behind that familiar smile is a man carrying deep pain as criticism aimed at his son mounts daily.
How much of that is opening press conference saying, okay, we are family, saying that he was sent to do certain things? Do you feel like people got attached to that, or it just was the fact that prime time is at Jackson State?
It's prime time. If my son plays cornerback, I want him to be around, in my opinion, the best cornerback ever to touch the field.
That's right.
If my son played DN, I'd have to talk to you and tell me who's coaching the DNs.
That's
but
right.
I was sending my son to play for prime.
His pain does not come from critics or losses, but from watching his son, Shedeur Sanders, get pulled into a system where politics outweigh performance. By every metric, arm strength, accuracy, field vision, Shedeur belonged in the top 3 of any NFL mock draft. Defensive coordinators who tried to unsettle him know he never flinches. He owns the unteachable leadership trait that turns strong prospects into franchise cornerstones. Then the narrative shifted. Draft boards that once placed him 2nd or 3rd slid him to 5th, then 12th, and eventually out of the 1st round on some lists. Analysts grew cautious, executives became vague. The statistics stayed strong, and the game film still proved his ability, yet the buzz evaporated. The abrupt silence felt deliberate and wrong. Former NFL safety and respected analyst Ryan Clark then delivered an unfiltered disclosure, not on a scheduled TV segment, but in an unscripted comment. He stated plainly that influential figures inside the league were not overlooking Shedeur Sanders. They were actively holding him back. The motive, Clark said, was political, and the real target was Deion Sanders, Hall of Famer, architect of Jackson State's resurgence, and the coach who turned a 1-11 Colorado program into a national headline. Deion's refusal to conform, wearing sunglasses indoors, dancing with players, speaking candidly, challenged an establishment that favors predictable images and rehearsed statements. According to Clark, that resistance to tradition was not forgotten. When Shedeur displayed the same mix of talent and confidence, concern spread through front offices and media circles. Questions about leadership style and attitude surfaced. Coded language for discomfort with a quarterback who mirrors his outspoken father. Clark's point was clear. The issue is not Shedeur's performance. If he had posted identical numbers at Ohio State or Alabama, endorsements and media specials would follow. Instead, interest cooled, because the Sanders family embodies a self-made identity the league cannot easily manage. Their visible pride and independent brand challenge a system that prizes control. And that threat, not football ability, is what Clark believes is suppressing Shedeur's draft stock. They have never loathed college football itself. They have resisted the people determined to reshape it. When Deion Sanders, black, direct, unapologetic, walks into a room of power brokers and speaks with authority instead of deference, critics recoil. During his playing days, they complained about celebrations and gold chains. Now that he is a head coach, mentor, and father, they label him something more polite, but just as dismissive, a problem. At Big 12 Media Days, Sanders addressed the accelerating chaos of the name, image, likeness market. He said college football needs a salary cap, not to hobble players, but to impose order on a system that showers unproven freshmen with seven-figure promises while the rest of a roster hunts for scraps. He called the situation unsustainable. Within hours, ESPN commentator Paul Feinbaum branded him a hypocrite, arguing that Sanders profited from NIL at Jackson State and now wants rules only because his most marketable athletes have moved on. The accusation spread quickly because it fit a comfortable storyline. Outspoken black coach gains from change, then protests when the advantage disappears. That framing ignores context. Sanders never criticized players earning money. At Jackson State, he urged corporate sponsors to partner with athletes who had been invisible to major brands for decades. What he wants now is stability, standardized guidelines, basic financial literacy, and roster balance that prevents locker rooms from fracturing over uneven payouts. When other coaches, Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Lane Kiffin, voiced similar concerns, they were praised for foresight. When Sanders spoke, the tone shifted to suspicion. The difference is not the message, it is the messenger. Feinbaum's response followed a familiar script. When black leaders question the structure of the sport, their motives are interrogated, their credibility attacked, and their competence doubted. He did not level the same charge at Jimbo Fisher when Fisher complained that NIL disturbed recruiting. He stayed silent when Kiffin lamented the transfer portal. But Sanders, who raised enrollment and television ratings at Jackson State, brought unprecedented attention to Colorado in one season and consistently mentors players beyond football, was called opportunistic. Feinbaum dismissed the cultural impact Sanders created, the exposure for historically black colleges, the draft picks developed, the infrastructure improved, reducing his work to a marketing stunt dependent on star sons Shedeur and Shiloh or two-way standout Travis Hunter. Sanders did not retaliate. He returned to practice, media obligations, and recruiting. His confidence is rooted in faith and in the responsibility he feels toward young athletes whose lives will extend decades beyond their highlight clips. When he asks for NIL boundaries, he is thinking about freshmen handed large sums without guidance, families unprepared for sudden wealth, and programs that abandon kids once production stalls. He has watched that cycle from the inside. He wants protections, not restrictions. Critics predicted Colorado would fade once Shedeur and Hunter leave. Instead, Sanders signed blue-chip quarterback G.J. Lewis and a wave of transfers eager to join a program that values personal growth as much as on-field wins. Recruits see a coach who challenges the status quo, who places black culture at the program's center without apology, and who will remain visible when social media buzz cools. They recognize that Sanders does not chase attention, attention follows his results. Media outlets reduced the upcoming Buffalo season to a win total prop. 6 victories, give or take. Sanders is playing a longer game. He wants to show young athletes, especially black athletes, that they can lead authentically, speak with conviction, and refuse to shrink for access. Success measured only by the scoreboard misses the point. If Sanders builds men who graduate with financial literacy, self-confidence, and community awareness, he will consider the mission successful, even if Colorado finishes with 5 wins instead of 10. None of that registers with commentators invested in an older hierarchy. For them, leadership should remain predictable, reserved posture, muted tone, minimal cultural expression. Sanders contradicts that image. The possibility that his methods could spread to other coaches, to other programs, threatens a model that has kept decision-making and revenue streams concentrated for generations. So the debate is not about hypocrisy or payroll ceilings. It is about control of the narrative and who is deemed qualified to write it. Sanders refuses to surrender that authority. He knows order is necessary. He also knows whose voices have been ignored whenever real reform is discussed. By speaking plainly, he forces television panels, athletic directors, and conference commissioners to confront issues they would rather defer: financial education, equitable resource distribution, and consistent national standards. Whether Colorado exceeds betting lines this fall will not change the trajectory Sanders has already set. He made Boulder relevant, energized recruiting beyond traditional power corridors, and broadened college football's cultural reach. That influence will persist long after social media debates cool. If his call for NIL structure eventually becomes policy, as the NCAA and Congress now contemplate, Feinbaum's soundbite will fade, while Sanders' imprint endures. In the end, accusations of hypocrisy say more about the accuser than the coach. Sanders has remained consistent: empower athletes, hold adults accountable, and inject stability before unchecked money corrodes the locker room. The people who stand to lose clout in that environment prefer the chaos they can manipulate. Sanders prefers a system that nurtures the players who make the sport worth watching. His advocacy is rooted in experience, not self-interest, and his critics will have to decide whether to engage with that reality or keep shouting from the sidelines.